Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you all for making it out. We are just about getting started here. I'm seeing people trickling in, as always, but we have a lot to cover. So I think we're just going to jump into it, and people will hop on as they go. And this is being recorded and will be available later. For anyone that's coming in later, we are talking with Lisa Rice, Renaissance woman, internationally known quilter. Um, but for our purposes, co-founder and chief executive officer of Grow Democracy DC. She was a proposer of Initiative 83, which was the election reform measure approved in 2024 by 73% of DC voters, with supermajority support in every ward of the district. So that's just a little bit on our guest today. Reminders quickly. We're going to be hosting our monthly phone bank that happens at the beginning of every month to talk about urgent campaigns and help support RCV around the country. That's on the first Wednesday of the month. You can learn more about RCV and the works that our state partners are doing in our Ask Us Anything open houses. Those are twice monthly. You can find that on our website as well. And you can hone your pitch or write an LTE. We have a monthly training event for both giving pitches in the field and written support for electoral reform and letters to the editor. So, um, we're going to go through kind of a fireside chat model here. So I'm going to be speaking with Lisa. We're going to go kind of chronologically through the entire experience from start to current, of getting this reform on the ballot in the first place and defending it and all of the many challenges and successes that came along with that. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or put them in the document that I assume Cecilia is linking in the chat somewhere. Yep, great. So we'll leave your questions there. We'll try to leave enough time to get to people's questions, but there's also a good chance that we'll get to a lot of things that you may have questions about over the course of our conversation. So with that, I'll start with just a primer for Lisa, and let her run. Um, if you could just, yeah, I mean, introduce yourself, anything else you want people to know about that I didn't say, and then kind of talk about the your own personal story of like how you got involved in this work in the first place.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Ben and Celia. And thanks everyone for joining this evening. Or some of you, it's probably afternoon where you are, but today. Um, yeah, so a long road. I will say that my personal road to this really was as a child. Um, my parents were very much believers in our democracy and really taught me to vote and what a sacred duty and a right it is to vote. And of course, being Black in America, that is something that, and we've all learned again this year that we cannot take for granted. Um, and so as a child, my parents would take me to the voting center with them. So voting is something that was instilled in me as something fun, as an event. Now, move fast forward to 2015, 16, when I think a lot of us were feeling the stresses and strains of change and negative change coming toward us. And I know for me, I saw that both parties seemed to be losing their way. I was a lifelong Democrat and decided in 2016 to change my registration to independent here in DC, and I'm a resident of Washington, DC. That means I'm an unaffiliated voter. On my registration card, it says NP, no party. And I think I signed that and mailed that in 2017. That was at the same time that I became an advisor for Unite America in 2016 and joined the board in 2017. What I didn't realize, friends, when I sent that card in was that I had disenfranchised myself, inadvertently disenfranchised myself from being able to vote in Washington, D.C.'s primary elections. In D.C., we are about 80% um, Big D Democratic, and so the primary is the only election that matters. And I called the Board of Elections like, hey, where's my ballot? And the answer was, you don't get a ballot. You're no longer a Democrat. And I said, well, that just seems wrong because I'm still paying taxes. And so I thought about it and I thought, well, somebody needs to do something about this because this just seems outrageous and unfair. And, and as a lot of us do, we look around and it's like, so who's going to do something? Who's doing, and the time ticked on. And then 2020 came and it still didn't change. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll find somebody to do, I will support someone in doing something about it. In the meantime, in 2021, there was a group of grassroots activists here that were really working with our council to bring ranked choice voting in. That did not ever make it out of committee, but that group was really committed to ranked choice voting. In the meantime, I had learned about the top four system and final five system and really was intrigued and thought, oh wow, this would solve a multitude of problems. Opening the primaries, and I really wish that we could have fully open primaries, ranked choice voting, so that we have folks getting elected by a majority, and then the folks who had the failed legislative piece in 21 came to me in 22, late 22, I guess, maybe early 23, and said, "Oh, we we hear you're going to we hear you're going to change the primary system." I was like, "What?" I'm pissed off about it, but I don't know that I'm changing it. And so then that began a courtship between us and them about, well, how do we solve this and how do we make this happen? It certainly is not going to happen through the legislature. I will say the first time that a council member introduced a bill for ranked choice voting and for opening the primaries in DC was, I believe, 2014. So cycle after cycle after cycle, legislators had tried and failed, and then it was sort of lukewarm. And so the group that was behind the ranked choice voting legislation in 21. We talked a lot, a lot, a lot. What are we going to do? They said, will you lead a ballot initiative for ranked choice voting? And I said, no, I absolutely will not, um, unless we also include opening the primaries. That is how important I believe this coupled reform is. It is so strong together. It puts voters first, and it 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 enfranchises 1 in 8 voters in DC, something that the Home Rule Act, our Home Rule Charter, is what dictates since the 70s how elections in DC work. It's a document drafted by the Congress, and so we've had home rule, but we really haven't had full enfranchisement. And so, everything's a negotiation. I'll tell you right now, everything's a negotiation. And at the end of the negotiation, we came up with a fabulous piece of legislation. I agreed to be the proposer, and we engaged in real grassroots campaigning, um, engaged in early education, especially in areas of the city which naysayers, because they were predominantly Black and poorer than the rest of the city, said, well, number one, those people will never get it. And number two, if you win without winning in those areas, then it's not a real win. Challenge accepted.
Yeah. Absolutely. Challenge accepted.
And if you learn nothing about me within the next 30 to 40 minutes, you will learn that I am competitive as hell and I'm a very hard worker. And so I I said throughout the campaign and lots of interviews with people and you know what why has the establishment not taken note of this? And the leaders of the DC Democratic Party were against us. The mayor was against us. Many members of the council were against us. There were two lawsuits filed against us. um, Campaign Legal Center came in as our pro bono counsel. But look, at the end of the day, I said, and I still say, I will not be outworked. I will not be outworked. Just
Yeah.
try me. Just that's,
Then, I do want to circle back onto some of the institutional opposition and lawsuits a little bit and kind of dive into that side of things because I think that's a thing that a lot of our network ends up running into. When you're fundamentally trying to change the way that power is distributed and decided upon, there's going to be
yeah,
some people who have things to say about that.
yeah.
So, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about particularly the lawsuits and kind of like the ridiculousness of the arguments that they were making, and then maybe also some like the council dynamics and like funding fights and all that.
Yeah. The so part of the process, and I don't know if for a ballot measure in other places it's like this, but there's a pretty stringent process before you can even your topic can be considered um, proper subject matter, and that is a ruling that is reached by the board of directors of the Board of Elections. The Attorney General's office weighs in on it. The DC council weighs in on it. And the council of the Board of Elections weighs in on it. And when I say it, I mean whether or not this proposal is appropriate subject matter. And it's a legal decision, and all these lawyers are, I'm not a lawyer, but whatever. But it's something that is taken very seriously in the district, and it's something that when when we went up for our what's in a hearing is a conversation, let's say a very formal conversation. The Attorney General had no problem with it. And the council of I want to make sure I'm getting everyone's count. The council of the Board of Elections had no problem with it. It's proper subject matter. The Attorney General, proper subject matter. The DC Council's council had issues, but those were political issues, not issues of substance. And so we were deemed proper subject matter. And immediately that sent the DC Democratic State Committee into a frenzy. Um, and the member of the council who has jurisdiction over the Board of Elections made it known that we would fail. And I will say, it felt personal at times. And I have said that if you are not ready to challenge the establishment, get ready, and you will come under attack. Um, and that is, I think, part of that is these folks n not being used to um, receiving pushback. And also, and again, I'll say I'm very competitive and I work harder than anybody else. And so, but to those folks, I was an unknown entity because I was not a Democrat and I did not belong to the party. And therefore, I was not to be taken seriously. I always said, wow, if they just read my LinkedIn page, maybe they would have had, a clue. But yeah, so as soon as we were deemed proper subject matter, the lawsuits began, and one was tossed out. And the charge was that it was not proper subject matter. Um, Campaign Legal Center stepped in on our behalf. And to be honest, the lawsuit wasn't initially it wasn't against the campaign. It was against the Board of Elections and the mayor as the head of the city. So it was the DC State Democratic Committee filing suit against their own mayor and the Board of I mean, it's crazy. But what we did, Campaign Legal Center said, um, we may want to, what do you think of filing an amicus brief? And I said, I think we should. And then it got spicy. And then there was another lawsuit. And it just, I will say, two things got thrown out. One sort of, it didn't grow legs, but it just stuck. It went up to the Court of Appeals and then it was thrown back down. And then they got another judge. I mean, it's like anything that could extend the life of this did. And it wasn't until, I want to say, maybe 30 days before the primary election, within 30, 40 days of the primary election this year, that the lawsuit that was filed in the end of 23, beginning of 24 was finally settled and, you know, tossed out and, you know, ended. And they have not come back again. So they finally have taken their beating.
Beautiful. We love to hear it. So, you're facing all this institutional opposition. You end up on the ballot for 24. What kind of walk us through the process of like, okay, we're on the ballot finally after all this work.
Right.
How are we going to organize around this? Who's going to do the education? All of like the work from that point to getting to your massive victory in all eight wards. Kind
Yeah.
of walk us
So
through that whole journey.
sure. And and I will say that our education, especially in the areas of the city that, as I mentioned earlier, were deemed too black, too poor, those seniors won't get it. We started education at the same time that we started collecting signatures. And so we had a very, very robust in-community education campaign. And the signature collection firm that we were working with that had been successful with other ballot initiatives said, you're starting your education and your coalition building too early. And I said, there's no such thing. There's really no such thing. So even the firm that had been successful with the three previous ballot initiatives in DC took issue with how early we were starting education. But our perspective was this is not just a simple legalized marijuana thing. This is about how people vote. And some folks want to make it more complex than it is, but we want to be able to arm voters with information. And so we ran an education campaign that talked about both parts of the ballot initiative. I say that we treated them like an old married couple. They were never separated. I know a lot of campaigns led with either ranked choice voting or open primaries and sort of hid the other. No, we did not. Every piece of literature we had, our emblem actually, our logo was two cherries. Cherries are the state fruit of DC, and we chose to have two, one for each part of the initiative. One talking about semi-open primaries, let independents vote is the way we put it, and one for ranked choice voting, which we have, oh my gosh, in the primary and the general, because again, remember, the primary in DC is the only thing that matters for all but two seats. And we had, oh my gosh, it's so weird to go from saying we have a problem, we had a problem in in several of our contests, especially if the incumbent was weak or there was not going to be an incumbent, where you'd have a rush of candidates to the ballot. And even if there weren't a rush, even if it was just three or four, we had people who were winning their primaries with 25, 28, 30% of the vote. They're going on. And remember that primary sets it. Yes, there's a general, but that primary is what gets those Democrats into office. And they're landing in office with what I called a sliver of a vote. You win with 32 or 35 or 38% of a vote, which only brought 20% of the electorate out. Where's your accountability? And who are you campaigning to? So yeah. So we started that education very early. And one of the things that helped us capture people's attention was we want to hold politicians accountable. And people that resonated with people in DC. A lot of people in DC feel forsaken by our electeds, not represented by our electeds. And so we could have discussions with them about how we felt both of these together because they force people who are running for office to campaign to more of us rather than fewer of us. And they must engage a majority in order to get into office. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Beautiful. Love it. On on a little bit on the institutional support side, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about the funding of the campaign and the process and the challenges and the peaks and valleys of working to actually fund this thing to get all this educational material out to all the voters of DC.
Yeah. We had a combination. I mean, think of any way you can raise money, we did it. Except for, I will say, we did not like go out on the streets with tin cans, but close to that. We had house parties. We had in-home fundraisers. We had support from Fair Vote. Fair Vote was very early in their support for the campaign. They had been supportive of the legislative, behind the folks who were helping with that legislative effort. We had we had money from Catherine Gell. We went out to Catherine and asked her early on. We said, Catherine, we're trying to do this thing that is the closest we can get to final five voting. And she said, well, it isn't final five voting, so I'm not going to help you. Ah, oh, we just need a little bit of money, Catherine. Come on. And it was really interesting as we were going to national funders other than Fair Vote, who was just like, yes, we're in. We'll help you. What do you need? I mean, the first grant we got from them was to fund our educator in the east of the river area of the city. But even United America, this is so highly ironic. I sit on the board of United America. Hey, really need some money. Sorry, you're not on our radar are. So, for so many people in DC that kept saying that this was funded by outside sources and that, that it was an effort by outside groups to push an agenda onto DC. My response to that was, are you kidding me? I'm out begging for money. And these folks were saying no. But we did get a little bit of money from UA right towards the end. Again, we were not on their radar, but they had a ballot initiative somewhere that didn't make it or something, and we were able to get a little money from them, but nothing, it was in these other campaigns where folks like Arnold Ventures and United America, I mean, they were putting millions and millions and millions of dollars into these campaigns, and that was not that was not what they were doing for us, and like I said, it was last minute, and helped us get out direct mail. But yeah, it was sort of all hands on deck to raise money. And most of the in-home fundraisers were rank something. So there was a fundraiser where we ranked the cookies because one of the guys who was the host is a really good cook and he loves cooking desserts. So he made like 7 different kinds of cookies. There was someone else, and I don't quite understand this. I like a baked potato and I like French fries. Well, they had, I think it was like 6 different kind of ways to prepare potatoes, and so rank the potato fundraiser. I just, look, I don't. I show up to these things. I'm not the one who who designed them, but it really was about, folks in the community want to get involved. And hey, I'd love to host a fundraiser. Okay, do you have anything? Yeah, I want to cook some cookie. I mean, it was that kind of very, very community driven.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, really, what is more emblematic of like big out of staters than a potato fundraiser, try to come in and run DC elections.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I'm kind of now. Um, so
Ben, when you said something and I didn't hear part of it, can you repeat it?
oh yeah, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so moving now towards like election night and after, and more towards implementation phase. What kind of so you win the vote. That's great. A lot of people from the outside perspective would think, all right, great, you did it. That's it.
Right.
Um, Tell us about the things that happened after that made it more complicated than it's just done now it's the law.
Yeah. So, yay, we won. It's the law. Is it really the law? In DC, and for those of you who don't know, DC is not a state. We are a colony. That's just my little commercial for statehood. One side effect is whether legislation is voted upon by citizen initiative, drafted by the mayor, or the council, that legislation has to go up to Capitol Hill and it has to survive a congressional review period. So ours went in a whole package with a bunch of other legislation, mayoral, council, and ours. Yay! And we survived. And I will say was um, that was not something that was a foregone conclusion, and we worked behind the scenes. Um, with folks on Capitol Hill to make sure that that would happen. And it happened, and we came back. And so then one line in our ballot initiative, and this is how it has to be in DC, is subject to appropriations, which means it then comes back to the council and we have to fight to get it funded. So, long story short, then began the battle for funding. And funding in this case means funding the Board of Elections that has already provided a budget for what it would cost. And so we fought in 25 in the budget process. Now, it doesn't have to be horrible and angst driven. The mayor could put it in her budget. She knows how much it costs. She did not. The council chair could do it. He did not. So this is where you're butting up against the establishment, right? That doesn't want it. The head of the party, the mayor doesn't want it. The head of the council doesn't want it. And then the council member who has jurisdiction over the Board of Elections, she could put it in her budget. We knew that wouldn't happen. And so what we needed was champions on the council to raise an amendment during the budget process to fund it. And what happened in 25, there were more members of the council who were willing to vote yes on only funding ranked choice voting. Folks were able to, cobble together money. I don't know if you remember, but the House of Representatives took away a lot of DC's money. This was tax money that DC residents funded in our budget, and they prevented us from using that. So it was a really, really tough budget year. All of that to say, we pulled off an amazing victory. We lobbied really hard. I'm raising money, right? I raising money did not stop with the campaign. It had to raise money for a lobbying firm to help us lobby. So in 25, we got funding for ranked choice voting. That means the Board of Elections had the funding they need to proceed to implement. But we did not get the funding for the semi-open primaries in 25. We had a perfect storm building this year, though, with the biggest, most consequential elections we've seen in a while in DC. The primary election, the mayor was not running, so you had a wide open mayoral race. Our delegate to Congress, who had been in the for 34 years. So that had been some people had run against her, but no one had, you know, had beat her. So that was she was not running, so that was wide open. And so it was going to be crazy. And I will say that regular person on the street does not pay attention to these funding battles. What they know is that we won with 73% of the vote in 24. And so a lot of independents were counting on being able to vote in the primary. We knew that that hadn't happened. Again, I'm raising money. I feel like that is all I do is raise money, but I'm raising money for lobbyists to help us um, to execute a multifaceted campaign. We got into council members' social media. We had activists who were on social media. We had demonstrations. We had did all kinds of things, and and the budget vote in 26 was split. It takes place over two sessions. The first vote was before the primary, and a lot of people were very irritated with the council when they realized that they couldn't vote in the primary because all they knew was, right, we won with 73% of the vote and ranked choice vote was taking place. Why wouldn't the primary be open? And so we the week after the primary, there have been a lot of pressure put on the council and when they had the vote. It was incredible. One of the council members who was staunchly opposed broke the dam and said not only would he vote, and this was at 10 in the morning of the vote. So let me tell you, 13 council members, we knew that we had six votes that morning. We were sure a seventh was coming. And then at 10 in the morning, we found out that the person who was one of the staunchest objectors released a statement saying, I am voting for funding semi-open primaries. I was wrong. You don't hear elected officials say they were wrong. And that broke the dam. And so what we were hoping would be a seven, maybe 7-5-1 or what it turned into a 9-2-2 vote. 9-4 two against, two present. And I really am excited about one of those present votes because I had for months been working on a member of the council who was going to be a no, not because he was philosophically opposed, but because he really fights for his ward. And if there's anything that is using funds that could be used in his ward for a recreation center or something for kids or whatever, if he feels that the funds could be appropriated better in his ward, he will just vote against it. And so I went to him and I said, please, 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 just vote present. Just vote present. And we did have Fair Vote ran an exit poll right at so people were voting by mail ballot. And then obviously on the 16th, people were voting. They put that poll in the field. One of their questions was about semi-open primaries. We had incredible results for that, especially in the three wards that are predominantly Black. And so on the 19th, are you guys following these dates? The 16th, the 17th, the 19th was the Juneteenth parade here, along with another member of my team and our lobbying team. We were literally out there with embargoed data from that poll, showing folks this is how people by ward feel about this. Um, so it just it was incredible, but I'm going to tell you, there was nothing that prepared us for that vote. We thought we would have seven yeses, and then the dam broke, and one of our staunchest opponents, the council member who has um, auspices over the Board of Elections, who has been against us every step of the way, even she voted yes to support funding for semi-open primaries.
Wow.
I will
That's
tell
crazy.
you, I cried. Our lobbyists cried. We were up, we were like, is this happening the way this is, what is going on? So it was incredible, incredible.
Amazing. That is such an inspiring story. Um, so last question for me, and then we'll turn it over to all the people watching. Um, can you just let us know what's going on now in DC? Like, are we gearing up for another RCV election? How's the implementation been going? What are you guys doing now? All that kind of stuff.
Oh, we always have drama. So, um, right before the legislative session broke for recess, one council member was going to introduce emergency legislation to change the tabulation method for election. We have an at-large council election for an at-large seat in November, and there are two seats. One always goes to the Democrat, and one is set aside by the Home Rule Charter for the non-majority party. But it's really, it's it should be two elections. It should be two elections, but it's run as one. So even before ranked choice voting, it was weird. They told us we had two votes, but votes could cancel each other out. Well, someone who is an independent and going to run in 28 is like, wait a minute, this might affect me. So look, we I thought we were in the clear, and we had to push back two tries at emergency legislation to change the way tabulation is going to happen in November. I will tell you that we killed that, but there is a chance that the council will try to bring it up again. Yesterday, I was in a council member's office saying, please, please, if we're going to change the way this is tabulated, which I still don't think it should change. What needs to change is how the damn office is set up, how that election is set up. But if we're going to change it, let's wait until January. Let's wait until after the election. You can't change tabulation methods, which is written into the law. It is written that way. You can't change the law in the middle of the election. You just can't do it. I mean, they can try, but they tried twice. Um, But that's all I'm up to. I like constantly battling. But yes, education is ongoing. I mean, that was part of your that was part of your question too. Yes, our team is gearing up. They needed a break. They are gearing up for education and have been participating in events already. And yeah, we're getting our 60-day plan ready. So
Yeah.
we're excited.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's so cool to be able to actually work on the election that you work so hard to create in the world. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start going through some of the questions that you guys have asked in the document. You can feel free to keep adding stuff. I'm going to prioritize things that I feel like we haven't covered up to this point, or haven't covered as much in depth. And we'll get started on that stuff. Um, so who are the in terms of like coalition organizations, obviously you couldn't do this all just by yourself. So who are some of your more reliable and powerful supportive groups or organizations that help get this across the line?
Well, one that was incredibly helpful was the League of Women Voters of DC. The league had been supportive of the ranked choice voting legislation that was raised in the council in 2021 when the ballot initiative was introduced. As I had to sit down for an hour and a half interview with the president and the head of policy for the League of Women Voters of DC, and they really ran me through a very detailed question and answer. But at the end of the day, they have been our staunchest supporters, great allies. And I will say the reason I'm calling them out first is because I know that there are other chapters of the league across the country that are not supportive of primary reform and not supportive of this kind of combined effort. And so, if you live somewhere, if you're an organizer somewhere and your league isn't supporting you, um, tell them about the league in DC. Others that were part of the coalition. Oh my gosh, we had some churches, we had some educational groups, we had, as I mentioned, Fair Vote. Um, Gosh, I'm trying to remember. We had a lot of stealth supporters because this town is so big D Democratic. We had a lot of folks that were, yes, we're supporting you, but we aren't out in the open. I will say the DC Dems blew that when they sent a mailer out that said vote, was in the fall, vote Democratic, vote yes, 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 and vote no on 83. On the reverse side, they listed um, all of their officers. My phone started blowing up with people saying, Lisa, I'm so sorry. And I didn't know what they were talking about because I don't pay attention to what the DC Dems mail out. But what happened was those people were not asked for their consent to have their names on the mailer. And so, as I say, that house started burning down from within. And so that brought a lot of people that were the head of Ward 6 Democrats, Ward 3 Democrats. So a lot of the DC Democratic groups by ward whose leadership were neutral after their names got put on that. They were like, well, I was neutral until you put my name up. And now I think we need to be more open about our support. So it was really just amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, we have a question kind of about educating voters about the actual use, how to use and cast a ranked choice voting ballot.
Yes.
So often the opponents will make this claim that it's like so complicated that no one could ever possibly do it without a doctorate degree or whatever. And often I think we kind of just like dismiss that out of hand of like, okay, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. But I'm wondering if there's any truth to that in your actual experience of educating voters, like what were the challenges of reaching voters about the actual method of voting and how they would cast their ballots, and how did you overcome them if there were any?
So remember when I was talking about every piece of literature, every palm card had the two components, right? It also included a mock ballot. Everything that everyone saw when we talked to them had a mock ballot. And so we walked them through, part of the education process was walking them through this is how you fill out a ranked ballot. This is how you do it physically. But let me talk to you about how we rank as adults every day. And we would talk about how you choose your clothes in the morning, how you order ice cream when you go out, or when you're at a restaurant, or whatever, or what movie you want to see, and we always took it back to this is something you already do, it's something you already know. And I would say in DC, because we have um, a public school lottery and also public housing lottery. So people from many economic groups within the city already knew what ranking was. They already did that when they applied for public house. They already did that when they wanted their kid to go to XYZ magnet school. And so it was something that was already within the fabric of how a lot of DC policy was enacted. And then once we would have that conversation about, oh, this is how I do it, then we would talk to if people had questions, well, tell me how the votes are tabulated. Well, uh, and we'd have whether it was on the screen or they could do something on their phones or whatever, and we would walk them through a simulation of this is how the votes are tabulated and how if your first choice is down there at the bottom and it's all the way, at the bottom of, let's say there are five candidates, then the votes are reapportioned. And we had an animation that made it really easy for people to say, oh, I get it. So we made sure that oh my gosh, my screen just went dark. I don't know what's going on. Oh, there it is. Um, so we made sure that what we talked to folks about was how to use that ballot, how to rank on that ballot, and what happens with the vote. And I saw something pop up about electeds do try to make it seem that it's difficult. And I will say, if you have a political science nerd, and that's, they want this, they want to talk about this system as opposed to what it delivers. What it delivers is accountability. This is how it delivers accountability because you have someone who gets over 50% of the vote. Let's make a visual so that you can see exactly how that happens. But we had to keep the nerds out. I'm going to tell you. And look, somebody in our campaign I self-identifies as a nerd and he's like, "You don't want me to explain."
Absolutely. Yeah, centering um talking a little bit more about the lobbying phase. So you've mentioned a few different instances where you've had success personally talking to council members and leaders and lobbyists. Was there any sort of like constituent-based lobbying practice that you guys had as a part of the campaign, and was any of it successful?
Um, Tell me a little bit more about what do you mean? Like,
Did you have like volunteers
oh, yeah, yeah. Oh,
volunteers
yes.
to reach out to their own electeds and do all that kind of stuff?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We call them voluntold. Um, and yes, so when I was talking to you about the house parties during the campaign phase and all of those, every time somebody wanted to do whatever, yes, we kept their name and how to get in touch with them. Everybody who wanted a yard sign, we had their name and how to get in touch with them. So when we were getting, excuse me, into the funding phase, and we needed people to go down to what the council does when legislation is being debated or things are up during the budget cycle. There will be open hearings. And so what we did was go out to those folks. And in 2025, we had people, I want to say, oh, I can't remember how many people. We had over 50 people show up in person to testify in favor of funding. And I saw somebody laughing. I saw a laugh roll up from someone who's on our team. So if they can tell me how many more than 50 we had, and then this year, same thing. Um, and that reminds me, you were asking about coalition partners, Veterans for All Voters, big coalition partner for us every step of the way. And so this year, when we went to talk about funding and to testify about funding for semi-open primaries, we had a big showing by Veterans for All Voters. I am a DC state leader for Veterans for All Voters. I'm from a military family. My My husband is a veteran. My father was a combat veteran for the U.S. Army in World War II. And so we had, I want to say, I don't remember how many people we had in there in the room, at least 30, 32. Of the 30, 32, six were from Veterans for All Voters. So we really made a strong showing. And then we had folks who submitted testimony online. So yes, as I said, voluntold.
Absolutely. Um, Questions about the DC Democratic Party are coming up a little bit, and kind of how their opposite how public their opposition was, like versus how like behind the scenes with opinion leaders what was
Mhm.
going on, and then like did it have a galvanizing effect of like getting people excited because there was like some attempts to push it down, or was it I don't know, could you just talk a little bit about like your interactions with the DC Democratic Party and what that was like?
Yeah, it was wacky because and it's not unlike the ways some unions are voting and coming out these days where the leadership feels this way and the rank and file feels this way. And that's what was happening with the DC Democratic State Committee. The leadership, the chair of the DC Dems, as they're called colloquially, the chair, the vice chair of the DC Dems, they were against it. But they hadn't actually taken a vote since the 2021 legislation. So they didn't even have a current vote, which was another piece of consternation. But on our campaign, our treasurer, Philip Pinnell, is a long-term Washingtonian. He's lived in Washington for over 50 years. And he was and is a leader in the DC Democratic Committee. And so you had it was very interesting because the leadership is the one that's spending their money down on these lawsuits. And in the meantime, we could not have won with 73% of the vote without having the backing of just everyday Democrats. Nothing wins in DC without Democrats supporting it. It's just the numbers. So yeah, it was a little wacky,
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say that I made a joke that I thought that the council member who is over the Board of Elections, that I said, I swear on the back of her office door there's a dart board and my face is in the middle of it. She really I mean, she really surprised me that last day when she voted in favor of funding semi-open primaries. We even asked, we had somebody ask, did she do that accidentally? And her staff said no, she did it intentionally. You know.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So the lesson is leopards can change their spots. I don't know. But I who's to say? I don't know. I mean, I haven't been a Democrat in 10 years. And
Yeah.
even when I was a Democrat, I wasn't part of the club. I wasn't part of the in I wasn't an in kid, you know.
Yeah.
I was not, I'm not a joiner.
Hmm.
I would say I probably have always been independent at heart, but I will say I was born at a time in America where Black families who were supportive of small d democracy. Most of them were members of the Democratic Party. And so when their kids registered to vote, I told you about my dad who served in World War II. So I call myself a late boomer. I was born after, I swear to you, I'm not a baby boomer, but the calendar says I am a late boomer. But when we registered to vote, we registered as our parents registered. I did not know there was an option. I seriously did not know that there was an option. Um, but I have always been a person that has voted on policy. Um, and And I think just what we saw as a country, what we saw happening in 2015 and 16, um, and and the duopoly, and we could have a whole nother hour about the duopoly and what they were doing in 15 and 16 to really just push we the people out of the conversation. That was, that was like, that was it for me. I was like, okay, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I don't think I'm a Democrat. I think I really am an independent.
Yeah.
But like I said, I didn't know. I didn't realize I was disenfranchising myself.
Yeah. And little did they know that that would the series of events that would happen as a result of that.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so just real quick, and then I'll take us home and wrap us up. This whole experience, this crazy like 5+ year journey that you've been on, um, if you can distill it down to like something that other states or other organizations can take from it, like what is the lesson that you learned above all the others from this process?
So I don't know if this is a lesson learned, but I will say you have to be in it from like you have to believe in it. You really have to believe in it. And I think that the key to success is putting voters first and believing that when more people are energized and want to vote, and when people who are elected understand that they serve us, they serve the voters. When we get people out of this mindset that those seats belong to them and they belong to us and lead with the heart, I would say the big overarching lesson is, have a big tent. Um, I'm an independent, and the coalition we formed in DC had everything from socialists to communists. And that is not an exaggeration. But I was and am an honest broker. I'm in it for the voters. I put voters first. And sometimes people can trip up on their politics when they really should be putting voters first. And I would say you can see this with some organizations that say they put voters first, but really, are you?
Hmm.
Um, because they have their own political things they want to do. I want people to be enfranchised. I want everybody to have the right to vote in every election, especially every taxpayer election. And I want us to be represented by folks who are put in by a majority, period. To me, ranked choice voting is a tool to get us there.
Yeah.
I'm not a nerd that is like, oh, this is this thing. It's this wonderful thing. It's a great thing, and it helps us get people in office with a majority. And that's what we need.
Amen. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Lisa, for taking the
You're
time
welcome.
to talk to everyone here. Thank you all for being here with us. Drop some feedback for us in the feedback form that is in the chat. Um, we again, upcoming events. We are hosting a phone bank at the beginning of the month to work on active campaigns like this and others around the country. Um, you can learn more about ranked choice voting and the work that our state partners do in our open houses. And you can hone your pitch or write an LTE at one of our monthly events for each of those. Thank you all so much for taking the time, and we will close it out here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was fun. Thank you.